Oh, well, hello, everybody. We have with us Steve Saputo and Bryan Pope. They are friends of Kaleo. Steve, you are in a very interesting environment right now. It's pretty cool. Jungles, maybe. And they are, they have a production company called Proper Sounds. Is that what you'd call it? A production company, maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an audio focused company. So we provide audio for
company.
anything you need. Yeah.
And you guys do original music, sound design, post production, voiceovers, and music licensing. And you've already worked with huge names like Etsy, Best Buy, Google, Fender Guitars, Olive Garden, Yahoo Sports. Like the list goes on and on. So you guys have had a lot of amazing opportunities already. And in my mind, when I think of someone who's in the world of music production, I think of movies I've seen where there's this like guy behind a desk covered in buttons looking out into like a massive space of oriental rugs and every instrument you can imagine. Is that what it's like? Is that what that job and that career looks like?
Sometimes it can be, but most of the time it's just us in bedrooms working on our computers by ourselves.
Yeah, it looks more like what's behind Bryan right now, and then I could show you what's behind me if I go back to. So this is what it really looks like. It's a basement.
A room.
This is the modern, composer's workspace. It's a room that you're comfortable in, with the gear that you're familiar with, in a space you can afford, and all of the tools you're used to using. So yes, sometimes it is like the movies though. Sometimes the budget is really big. It does look a lot like what you see. They're just in the movies. They're using real studios. So yeah, sometimes it does look like that.
Awesome. Well, if it's okay with you, I'm going to invite some of our Kaleo songwriters to come in and hear this, and I'm sure they've got questions for you too. So say hello. We've got.
Just realized I have my Kaleo shirt right here.
Yes. That's an incredible sweatshirt.
It is. It's amazing.
All right, guys. So if you don't mind muting your mics except for Steve and Bryan, that would be awesome. All right, so let's start. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how you even started and got into music? Because we'll start with you, Steve, because I actually knew you back in high school, barely, but we had a class together.
Did we really? Wow.
We did. I think it was psychology, and
with what? I won't digress. Sorry.
I think his name was Mr. Ryan. Does that sound familiar?
Yes, that sounds very familiar.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I have
a mustache.
There's so much. We could go down a totally different trail with that. But were you into music even then?
Yeah, I think I started. Getting into trying to write songs without knowing that you could be like a songwriter when I was probably 7 or 8. I think I had a keyboard in my grandma's house, and I would use one finger to pick out the Michigan fight song or Mary Had a Little Lamb by ear, and then eventually had a friend who we would just try to write funny songs and make ourselves laugh with little home keyboards, and we had a cassette player we could record on, and we would record ourselves. And we had a band name called, I actually can't remember. I just remember my nickname in the band was Slice. Don't know why. I think we were inspired by some movie. And then when I was about 15, I actually picked up an instrument and intentionally started trying to learn. And then I learned guitar, and that transformed into learning keyboard, and then trying to explore becoming a singer and playing in various bands from about the age of like 16 up until now I still obviously play with people. So yeah, that's been a brief look at it.
All right, what about you, Bryan?
I started playing music when I was about 5. I started playing violin.
Bring up the photo.
Yeah, I was looking for it. It's somewhere. I don't think I have it saved on my computer.
Okay.
I have a really good photo of me and then me again. Steve, maybe you can find that.
I'm on it right now.
Yeah, so I started playing violin when I was 5 years old after looking through like a musical instrument book and just liking the way that it looked. So I started learning the Suzuki method with that. And then when I was in middle school, all of my friends were starting to play guitar. So I wanted to play guitar, And so I switched over to doing that and taking lessons and being in bands starting around 8th grade, I think. And then all through high school, I was in bands, and then all through college. And then in high school and college, I started getting into jazz and played in like the big bands there and all that kind of stuff. And then Steve and I met through just playing in different bands in kind of the same circles. And then through Kensington too, just playing music together that way.
So when you got interested in more of the, music production, where did you develop your skill set? Did you guys go to school? Did you study just from learning online? How did you learn that? Oh, let's start with the
there it
background. It's pretty special. There it is.
Yeah, most of the recording stuff that I learned was from working with Mike at Kensington. I had never really gotten into recording much aside from just making little demos and things at home. But it wasn't until working at Kensington that I think I really got into recording and trying to like understand how everything works and what sounds good and how to make things sound the way you want them to.
And what like surprised you most about what you were learning?
Some parts of recording I think are not what you would expect. Like, for example, if you want there to be like more bass present in a song, it's not necessarily that you're boosting the bass frequencies in everything. Because I think originally I would say like, oh, I want to hear more bass, so I'm just going to turn bass up in the track, but that doesn't necessarily translate. Things like recording live drums are a lot more complicated than you would think. Anytime you're dealing with multiple microphones, it gets kind of tricky. But yeah, it's a lot more of a time-consuming process than you might initially think.
What about you, Steve? How did you develop your skills?
I think that when you're a songwriter or you're wanting to write songs, you want to hear your idea. You want to be able to play back the idea that's in your head and listen to it. I think there's something beautiful about the process of like having something in your head, laying it down, and then being like, wow, that's really interesting. I created that. So I think being a songwriter leads you to wanting to record. And so that was the process for me, is that I would just have ideas and I'd have friends that I was working on ideas with, and then we'd be like, we just got to find a way to record this. So it would always, whatever we had available, if it was a little, like I said before, a cassette recorder, and then it turned into having a laptop with GarageBand, and then it turned into like, as you go, more elaborate setups. So for me, getting into recording was very much just a natural process of needing to hear more of my ideas completed, or having a platform to like fully get out all of the ideas. Like if it's a guitar part and a piano part and drums, and then there's a synth, and then I have background vocals, and it's like, so the recording has always been a tool to express the idea. Same thing with, I think, instruments. If you're a songwriter, you're gonna tend to gravitate towards instruments as a tool to express your idea rather than just to play the instrument for the sake of playing it.
Let's talk about sound design, because that's something that's kind of new to me. What exactly, how would you describe what sound design is?
Sound design can mean a couple of different things. Some people use the term when they're actually creating sounds. Like, so with a keyboard, with a synthesizer, you can turn all the knobs, and you can create your own unique keyboard sound with a synthesizer, which Bryan can dive into if we want him to, because he's really good at that. But you can, so that's one way that people use the term sound design. The other way we use it is when we're adding sound effects to something that's like animated, or it could be live action too. So anytime you hear, like, I'll give you an example. I can share my screen here for a project we worked on with Google, and I'll give you some good examples of what sound design is. So sit tight for a second here while I figure out how to use the technology. So this was a really fun project we did. I believe it's for Google Assistant, so a product they were selling. So we'll just watch this really quick. I'll put this video up. Cool. Everyone was able to see and hear that.
Yeah,
okay?
that was cool.
Yeah, so every single sound in there, we get this video and it's completely silent. And so we have to go through and figure out what each little thing sounds like. So what does this triangle sound like falling down here to this white long oval? What is, you know, towards the end here, it's what do these blocks sound like as they, turn around and these circles become three-dimensional, they go from 2D to 3D. And what does this right here sound like as this square is going from really small to really big? So we have to figure out what each thing might sound like, especially when there's not a specifically associated sound already with those objects. So Bryan did something really great here where he took all these little blocks. So you see all these little movements here, all these tiny little detailed objects, and he took a keyboard, basically like a real synthesizer, and he just made little sounds here. I can solo all this up, just that section here, without the low synth, and you can hear all these little bleeps and bloops. So yeah, that is kind of what we do with sound design, is we're just trying to imagine, you know, what these shapes and things sound like. And sometimes it's more conventional. So like you see this conveyor belt here. And so for that, we used a sound that was just what you would expect a conveyor belt to sound like. So we have a sound here called belt, and we'll.
Yeah, so it's usually a lot of layering different things to kind of make the whole thing happen. It's fun because you really get to be creative and come up with, you know, what does it sound like when a triangle just falls over. So it's super open-ended, which makes it really fun and dependent on, whatever you want to do.
While we're here, Steve, could you just kind of point out what we're looking at as far as all the different color blocks? Just because that might, you know, help understand the program that you're using and how it's laid out.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. So this program's called Pro Tools, and it's one of the bigger audio programs we call a digital audio workstation, or a DAW, that most audio professionals work in. And so each one of these channels here, these are just different channels that hold different audio. So each channel has its own waveform on it. And so from these channels, we can sort of control and manipulate each piece of audio. So let's see what this is. This is just a fun little keyboard sound here. Well, where did it go? So see, I can hit this S button. This is to solo it. So I just want to hear this audio. I hit the S. If I want to mute it, I hit the M button. There's just a million different features. And so we take these little blocks here. Let's find a good example. Let's see what this sound is. Right here, this low synth. So right here, I'm looking at the waveform. This is just a visual representation of what the audio is doing. And so you can zoom way in and you can see the peaks and valleys of this waveform. And this just represents the physical energy that is coming out of your speakers in the form of a visual. So you can kind of see, and it also helps you to edit. So if I didn't want this low synth here, if I didn't want it starting here, I could easily just get rid of it. I could just highlight it and hit delete, and there's no longer sound there. So we're manipulating in that sense, and we're also adding something called plugins. So if we loop this here, this is kind of fun. we've got a loop now of this synth. And these plugins, I can change the sound radically. So I can make this just bass. This is an EQ plugin, so I'm taking out certain frequencies. I can get rid of all the bass. Just make it sound really small. I can add wobble to it. I can make the sound bend. We can add reverb, or this is delay, so this is an effect. If I wanted to, I could also add something like distortion. So if I wanted this to be dirtier, more intense, I could. So there's just almost an infinite amount of ways in which we can affect and manipulate this audio. I could go as far as to completely reverse the sound, which we do a lot of. So if I just open up this is a plugin called Reverse. And so I highlight the region, hit the button, and all of a sudden now the audio is backwards.
Yeah, this is one of the really fun parts about sound design. When you're looking at something, say for instance, there's something close up on the screen, and then there's something in the distance. The thing that's in the distance is going to sound different than if it was up close to you, even though you could technically make those things sound exactly the same. But in order to like create distance, in order to create space, in order to make things feel like they're moving, we'll do a lot of things with like raising and lowering the pitch of certain sounds, or adding reverb, or the way that you carve out the EQ will make it feel like there's some depth to it too. So that's another really fun part about this, after you kind of collect the sounds that you want to use.
Right. Yeah. So what Brian's saying there is, like, if you kind of imagine, what does this sound like in real life if it were to exist. So if we're adding footsteps to animated character that's walking, if that person is in a different room, then a footstep sounds a lot different than if that person's right next to us. And if that person's talking and they're really far away, then we think, well, what does it sound like for a person to talk really far away from us? And then we try to figure out how to manipulate the audio in this realm to mimic what is happening in real life. And so there's a number of ways to do that. But yeah, it's kind of fun. It's like a fun puzzle to solve.
Very cool. Bryan, do you have something pulled up that you wanted to show?
Yeah, let me check this. So this video here was for an invitation for a Christmas party that friends of ours called, their studio is called Gunner. They do a lot of the animation work, and we do a lot of the music. So kind of forget. Yeah, so this video is pretty fun. So this is an example of doing a little more realistic sound design and what you would actually end up hearing. So like all of these like footsteps. Oops, make sure that you can hear it. So it was taking a lot of random sounds. So this is a good example too of layering sounds to figure out kind of what one sound sounds like. So here I have about 3 or 4 different footsteps. I have like some metal sounds and all sorts of little movements that make it feel like one thing. And then we go in and pretty meticulously line up exactly like where like his foot hits the ground, like right here. So lining all the sound up like that.
Are these actual footsteps that you recorded yourself?
No. So that's actually a good thing to talk about. So when we're doing sound design, sometimes we will record the physical thing. And then a lot of times too, we'll make sounds with synthesizers, like with that Google project. And then other times we have a huge library of sound effects that we pull from. And so it pretty much has any sort of sound effect you could imagine, like different types of footsteps walking on snow and gravel and all that sort of stuff. So it's really picking and choosing different samples that sound good and can kind of blend with what you're seeing visually.
Can you guys see everything? See this little video floating around the screen? Okay, cool. So yeah, I will show you this. So Bryan and I did this. This is let's see how long this is. It's an almost 2-minute long animated piece. And so they gave us like 5 or 6 small videos that all combined to make one long video. So we had to do the small ones first and then make a bigger video fit together. So this is the full length one. And it's the journey of this kind of guitar hero type guy venturing. He's on a journey and he's trying to conquer some beast with his music. So that's what this is. Let's take a look. And we did all the music and sound effects that you're hearing.
Cool. Love that one.
Yeah. Super fun.
Yeah, so how many tracks of sound design are there?
That must have been hundreds of, sorry, I was just checking something. That must have been, hundreds and hundreds of different tracks. If we get rid of the music and we just listen to the sound design, it's probably pretty fun. So this is without the music and just the sound effects.
Yeah, so sometimes we have the real sounds for things, and then other times we use music as a way to do the sound design too. So when you see like the pedal popping up on the screen and you're just a nice bright chord, we use that as like the sound design sort of thing there.
Yeah, exactly. So like scenes like where he's doing something that has a real sound associated with it, like he's popping out of the water here and walking. Running, we hear pig runs. Those are all very real sounds, and then what Bryan was saying is that this gets a little more magical here, where what does it sound like when a pedal descends from the heavens? Yeah. Yeah, it's very fun though.
Very cool. Awesome. Well, I was going to throw it to these guys to see if they have any questions for you. I see, Arthur, is that your hand going up? All right. What's your question, Arthur?
Well, first, I wanted to say I like the one without music because it pulls me in way more when I hear just sound effects. And when something's happening in that, it was just like a bit of silence first. And then it was something else that just like, that was a weird sound. And it like brings my brain back to the wherever that is. So I like it without music if I had to choose between those two. And my question to you guys is there one sound that specifically draws like a song all together that you have to put in every song that you make? Is there one song or one sound that you have to put in just one track that makes it solid?
Ooh, that's a good question, man. I would say that there's no, first off, I would say that the one thing everyone needs to learn first with music is that there are no rules. And so that's the hardest hurdle to get over, is everyone, when they're learning something, it's really nice to be able to define your boundaries, because that helps the learning process. And so it's helpful at first to have some rules. But in the end, there are no rules with music. It can be whatever you want it to be. So it can just be you singing over a drum beat. You know, it could be just a piano. It could just be one single note held the entire time, and spoken word. It could be whatever you want it to be. But I would say that if I had to pick one, I'd say that drums almost always either elevate or ruin a song. So if you have really great sounding drums, and they really fit the track, that can just take a track to a different level. And likewise, if the drums are not sounding good to me, it can make everything else that sounds really good sound bad. That's just my personal thing. So I spend, and then obviously vocals will always be as important in terms of how good they sound and how much impact they have. But if it's just purely a musical perspective and looking at the track, drums are my thing, where it's like I have to get that right. And if I do, then I'm feeling very excited about the track.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say that it's like one sound in particular, but the way that I think of a track is like, it's sort of like painting and thinking that everything kind of has like its range. So if you were to have a track that was like guitar, piano, like some horns, cello, those are all kind of fitting into the same sonic or like tonal range. So I think the more that you can think of almost like categorizing sounds, so like an 808 or like a bass drum or like a sub bass fits in one area, and then above that you might have like a kick drum or a snare drum, and then like vocals fitting in a little bit higher than that, and then like cymbals and like the more sparkly sounds. So I think the more that you can kind of spread out and widen those, it makes it feel more complete, or to me, or those, it's like a complete picture of what you're thinking.
Okay.
Cool. Ben, you got your hand up? All right. What's your question?
So this is like quite general, but I know like we just went over the like how a sound engineer like takes a video and like the process of making the sound for that. Like, could you go into a bit of how the sound process is when you're producing for like a song itself, like when you don't have a video, for example? Like, does that make sense?
Yeah. You're talking about for like if we're working with maybe an artist or our own music and we're starting a song from scratch?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways that it can start. It depends on the environment you're in, for one thing. So if I'm with an artist or if I'm with Bryan, it'll be a different start than if I'm with, just by myself working on the track. So let's say, I'm with an artist and I'm serving as the producer, and they don't already play an instrument themselves. They're just a singer or something like that. Usually what I do is I'm going to pull up a tonal instrument first, and just kind of get like some kind of rough thing happening with it. It's usually a keyboard. Sometimes it's a guitar, and we're just laying down the chords so that they can sing to it and we can kind of get the general idea. Sometimes if like the song is, particularly dancey, or we know it's already living in a specific certain genre, then we're going to pull up sounds particular to that genre. So if someone comes in with like an 80s kind of vibe, thing, like almost like like a Bruno Mars kind of thing. I know I'm starting with some kind of Juno sounding synth, and I have that in there. That's going to be the basis of where we start. Then after that's in, and we usually get a scratch vocal, because you kind of need that scratch vocal to kind of guide the energy levels. Then we start playing with other sounds, and it's probably going to be drums and bass after that. And we just get a little foundation going. And then it's once you have the foundation, then lots of things start changing, and you start getting ideas, and it starts to build. But you just kind of, the first thing we do is we always get like some tonal foundation going. And then, occasionally, you just, maybe you start with just percussion if it's feeling like the percussion is just going to drive this song. So we're going to start with a beat, or someone has a great idea. Maybe Bryan's already got some kind of thing he's got in mind, and we'll just start with that. So sometimes it's just feeling out the room and the vibe, but a lot of the times it's just like, as a producer, pick your instrument, whatever you're most comfortable on, and get started there, and then everything's going to change eventually anyways. Hopefully that's helpful.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's also good to sometimes start a track just from a single sound that inspires you or gets you excited. I've made songs before, like centered around like maybe one sample that I really like, or just a keyboard sound, or like a drum sample or something like that just makes me excited, and I build everything around that.
It's a great point. Yeah, Arthur, we wrote together, and that was exactly how it started. Is he brought this vocal sample that just got him really excited, and that was the whole track. And all we did was we took that one vocal sample he had, and we threw it in the track, and we looped it, and then everything else naturally flowed just from that one sample. And it was because we were both excited about the sound of it. So that's a great point, Bryan. Yeah, if you have a sound, you're like, ooh, that just like gets the juices flowing, then definitely, yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Samantha, you got a question? All right.
Yes. Because you have to do like a lot of stuff where you come up with what like a picture sounds like to you, or what like a color sounds like, or a shape. Do you ever find yourself repeating sounds when like animations are similar, or something correlates like from one animation to another? Do you ever like repeat those sounds because like that's what it sounds like to you?
Yeah, sometimes, especially in the advertising world, sometimes it's part of their what they call like a sonic brand, or like certain sounds that are associated with their brand. So, for instance, we're working on this piece for Etsy right now, and I think this will be our third video we've done with them. And with Etsy, we're using a lot of organic sounds to make the track. So like Etsy is all handmade stuff. So have like paper crinkling sounds, and like scissors cutting, and like the sound of like saws or wood being cut, and that kind of stuff. And using that as part of like how we might build a beat, or use that as sound design. But generally, if it's a video similar to something we've worked on, sometimes it might be the same sounds. But it's same thing with writing a song. It's kind of about establishing a mood. The other thing to think about too is when we're doing sound design, how people are going to watch it or listen to it. I mean, the majority of people, I think, would watch a video on their phone. So certain sounds will kind of poke out and be really obvious on a phone because of the small speaker on there. So like certain low frequencies and things like that, you kind of have to avoid sometimes because you won't actually hear them on a phone. But yeah, every project can be different, but it still kind of fits that same like tonal palette, I guess.
Yeah, there are some similarities. So like if, let's say it's a huge circle and a tiny circle. Well, something that's big in real life typically makes a really low rumbly sound. Something that's really tiny in real life makes a really high, like, so if I take this bowl here on my desk and I move it, the bowl's tiny, and so that it makes a high pitched sound. If this bowl was massive, it would there'd be a lot of rumble to it. And so there are things like, so we kind of know instinctually, like, all right, that object represents something really large. Large things typically make low sounds. So we do kind of fall back on that stuff. But yeah, like Bryan's saying, it's definitely inspired by the mood of the piece more than anything, though. So changes a lot.
All right, so I have a question, because a lot of the people that we work with are songwriters. If you get to choose which song you're producing, what do you look for in the song?
Ooh, it's a good question. If I get to choose the song I'm producing, I mean, it's different every time. I typically like songs that like pull on your heartstrings a little bit. So I like slower things that like are more heartfelt, and I typically don't gravitate towards the upbeat dancey stuff just naturally for me. So I think I always drift, and you probably can see that in the songs I produced for Kaleo, as I'm usually choosing the ones that are a little more mid-tempo or down. Yeah, that's pretty much it for me. I just things that make me feel emotional or heartfelt are the things I'm going to gravitate towards at first.
For me, I've always been more drawn to the musical side of songwriting as opposed to the lyrics, almost that the lyrics are kind of an afterthought. I think music, like if you listen to a song in French, like you might have no idea what they're saying, but there's something about the song that you like and can gravitate towards. So I think all music can be a mood. So like, and that's how I would pick a song to work on. It's like, just how does it make you feel listening to it? Maybe it's one lyric that's compelling. Maybe it's like just the phrasing of how someone's singing something. Because I mean, a lot of times with songwriting too, if we're trying to come up with lyrics, it might just be like singing nonsense, but you like the way that the cadence of everything kind of flows, and you go with that. So I think a lot is based on just how it feels.
And so for any of like the young people that are kind of working with Kaleo that are interested in learning music production, would you recommend one of the best ways to learn is just hang out with someone who's doing it and work alongside them?
In terms of learning music production?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think hanging out, is there a little bit of a delay between us? Sorry. Yeah, I think hanging out with people is great if you can find, people that are already doing it and are doing things that you think are cool and you like to listen to. You'll learn a lot. I think the best way to learn though is to have an idea that you are excited about and that you want to hear back. You want to record and hear it back. That'll drive you to want to learn how to record. I think you'll never really learn music production if you sit down like it's homework. It's sort of got to be, gosh, I really want to, I have this song idea and I just got to hear it, or I just want to create something and see what it sounds like. Like it's got to be the motivation to like hear your creation is probably what will drive you. So yeah, just start opening a program like GarageBand if you have a laptop, or it's on your phone too. Just start hitting buttons and hearing sounds and being creative and seeing where it leads you, and that'll naturally, I think, lead you to just becoming more proficient.
Yeah, I think a lot of recording is just like finding out for yourself and just experimenting with, I mean, if you have one microphone, what does it sound like when you're recording guitar or drums with just one microphone, and maybe just moving it around the guitar or in a different place in the room and seeing how that affects it. It's a lot of experimenting, but that's part of what makes it super fun too.
Mm-hmm.
That has definitely been a theme in all of our interviews, the space for just playing around, experimenting, to stumble upon something, which is kind of cool. So I know you guys write original music and you guys work on things together. How do you guys collaborate? What are some good like tools for working with someone else or with a team?
That's a good question, and I think we're always learning how to be better at collaborating. I think that's a lifelong skill, is to learn how to collaborate, because we often get stuck on our own ideas, and we don't want to, first off, it feels good to have your idea be heard, right? It feels very validating. And so there's a natural instinct in most young artists and even adult artists, we both fight it all the time, is to fight the urge to want to just hang on to your own idea. And so you have to be able to, I think being a good collaborator is learning to like listen to other people's inputs, even if it doesn't totally feel right to your instincts at first. And then realizing that the best things come from when everyone is giving input and feels heard in the creative process. So if you're working with someone, and this is really hard to do, especially if you're young and very passionate about what you're hearing or want to hear or writing, is just to really try and make sure everyone is feeling like they're part of the process, and you're all fully exploring each other's ideas, because you're going to end up with something that you're just happier with in the long run most of the time. So that's the key for me, is always trying to remember that, you know, I gotta let my own ideas, which I might think are great in the moment, get pushed to the side a bit, because often I find that the perspective that someone I'm collaborating with is bringing to me is actually a better and more refined idea.
Well,
Yeah, for sure. I think ego is one of those things where, like, I remember playing in bands and like writing the guitar part, and like someone might make a suggestion like, hey, why don't you change this part here, or why don't we try this feel here? And I would be super protective and defensive over anything that I would have written. And then over the years you realize, oh, that's not really what's serving the song best. And I think that's the biggest thing and the most important thing to focus on when you're producing a song, is like your goal is to make the best thing that you can and serve the song. And if you're producing an artist, be able to produce that artist in a way that is going to put them and put the song in like the best light. So your job is always to serve the production, serve the artist, make the song the best it can be.
all right. I think that's good for today. Thank you so much. I know they probably have lots of other questions, and I know there's a ton more to the world that you guys live in that we could talk about today, but I just want to say thank you. I'm going to unmute them so they can all say thank you as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, this is fun.
You guys are always so fun to work with. Your creativity and your energy and your vibe in the studio is always just so kind and approachable, and I think that just speaks to the kind of people you are. So thank you for all that you do for our program and for being willing to answer some of our questions. It was fun.
Thanks.
Thanks. Good to hang with you guys for a little bit.
Yeah.